visually. So welcome everyone. It's really great to see you here for this lunchtime program on protecting pollinators. My name is Stella Tarnay and I'm co-founder and executive director of Capital Nature. And I am joined for this presentation by my fellow co-founder, Anna Kahanui, who will introduce herself in a moment. And then Natasha Garcia Anderson, who is our special guest. Natasha is with the District Department of Energy and Environment. She's a wildlife biologist, and she's the city's pollinator expert. So whatever questions you might have about pollinators, and in particular, how to protect them during this important time, late summer, with all of those mosquitoes buzzing around, she's our go-to person. So I welcome both of them, and I also welcome you. And I wanted to just make sure if all of our master naturalists, can you put like yes in the chat if you haven't yet?
Or thumbs up, or thumbs up maybe?
Thumbs up, yep, that'll work.
If you're a master naturalist. And it could be from any jurisdiction. I'm a Fairfax master, or Virginia master naturalist. So we got some master naturalists in there. Great. Kathy's got her thumbs up.
Great to see you here. So this program started in my neighborhood, which is why for me, it's kind of a neighborhood-based program. So I live in Mount Pleasant in DC, and I'm, with Anna, I'm a co of this nature nonprofit, and our mission is to bring nature into people's lives, kind of where they live. So one of the things I do is I walk in my neighborhood, and you can't help but notice in Mount Pleasant, there are a lot of pollinator-friendly gardens. We have guerrilla gardeners who are taking over the median strips. We have Audubon certified gardeners. You see a lot of, echinacea and a lot of other native plants. But I'd also noticed when I was doing my citizen science explorations, we as iNaturalists at Capital Nature, as many of you do, that over the last few years, I've seen a decline in pollinators. Fewer bees, fewer butterflies, and it really started to concern me. And I also noticed that I saw these weird trucks in our neighborhood that had words like pest control on them and, killer squad, maybe not that, but kind of those words. And I started to think that, there's something going on, and it really just was exploration. So kind of starting from neighborhood, we had an opportunity to connect this question with our DC Master Naturalists, who are co-hosts of this program with us. Elizabeth Guerin is here, who runs that program. And then also have the opportunity to have the Arlington Master Naturalists join us, who have been discussing this issue. So it's now a regional project from the neighborhood to the region, which is often how things go and how actions take place. So that's kind of the background of this program. And I'm sure that many of you have experienced some similar things as you observe the pollinators in your neighborhood, and you may have similar concerns. So half of this program is going to be Natasha presenting about protecting and supporting pollinators. And the second half will be a discussion with all of us, because I know especially the master naturalists, you guys have been exploring all kinds of techniques to manage those mosquitoes while you're also protecting the bees and the butterflies. So we'll leave lots of room for that. And before we start, I just want to make sure Anna has a chance to introduce herself. She's our technical host and my partner in crime and all good things. Anna, do you want to say a few things?
Hi guys, fellow nature nerd, Virginia master naturalist, nature photographer, forest bathing guide. Just love seeing you all here. I actually walk my dog. I'm in Burke, Virginia, in Fairfax County, and went up to the pollinator garden at our local elementary school today, and just kind of delighted in the butterflies and dragonflies and other pollinators today to kind of get my brain excited about today's conversation. So thanks everyone.
Thanks, Anna. So now I'd like to turn it over to Natasha. And Natasha, please feel free to introduce yourself and any other words that maybe anything I missed about you. And then let's go ahead and do the screen sharing and have you present.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm Natasha Garcia Anderson. I am a wildlife biologist here at DOEE. So I do manage the beekeeping program for the district, and also work with our pesticides department on our pollinator protection for the district as well. So a lot of times people see pesticides and they're like, but we work together on this pollinator protection program. So I'm going to talk about how we can help our pollinators in an urban setting like the district, and also how you can do stuff like in your own yard. If you're like me, you've got a tiny little postage stamp, but you can always do something good with that. So I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. Okay.
I love your little bee there, Natasha.
Could everyone see it? Yeah, okay, cool. So yeah, we're gonna just be talking about protecting pollinators. There's our little bee friends. So I'm sure you guys all know this stuff. Some of the stuff may be stuff you already know. Some stuff may be new. Some stuff may be stuff just to provoke conversation, because there's lots of conversation around all of this. So some of our biggest threats to pollinators, no matter where you are, is loss of habitat, loss of forage, that kind of go hand in hand, climate change, and pest and disease. A couple of the biggest ones around here, I would say, are loss of habitat. There's constantly building stuff. So vacant lots that people thought were good for nothing. They're, you have a lot of your native bees living there as well. And also the loss of forage because of that. And climate change, as you know, one day it could be nice and sunny. The next day it can be snowing, like this picture where there's snow on the cherry blossoms. So if you're a pollinator and you think that it's all fine to come out and the next thing you know it's snowing, it's not a good scene for you. We also have problems with pest and disease. A lot of this is with honeybees, but there is spillage over into native bees as well. So that's another big issue for our pollinator friends. So one of the biggest things we always say is, how can you help pollinators? One of the big things is native pollinators need native plants. So planting native plants is always a good way to help pollinators in your area. Also create habitat. We're talking about a lot of our native bees are ground nesters, so they need that bare soil or loose soil to live in, and also minimize the use of pesticides and report misuse. So we'll talk about this a bit more. Pesticides have their place, but it's always important to make sure you follow the label, and the label is the law. And also, if you see something suspicious going on, especially here in the district, if you see someone spraying and their truck's not marked, or they can't tell you what they're spraying, you can always report them to our pesticide division. And that's the same in every state. So if you don't live in DC, if you live in Maryland or Virginia and you see something, you could always report them to the pesticide division, just to make sure you know what they're spraying and they're using it properly. And also you can support conservation, like you talked about, gardens at schools, and also guerrilla gardening, and also just conservation projects. Just be a supporter of them. So let's talk a little bit about native plants. I'm sure you guys are all down with the native plants. Some people aren't, but one of the bigger things you could do is also remove some of those invasive plants. As you are well aware, things like English ivy, porcelainberry, things like that could take over quite quickly. So removing those and replacing with native plants is always preferable. We'll also talk about this a bit. Plant for continuous blooms. You'll see there'll be a big boom of blooms usually in the spring, and then as the summer wears on, there's less blooms out there. It's the dearth, so there's not a lot of food out there for pollinators. So the idea of planting things that will bloom continuously throughout the season is really important. Also cleaning up, just giving it some extra time. People, as soon as this gets a little warm, everyone wants to want to clean up their garden. That's probably not the best move, because you may be ready for spring, but a lot of our pollinators and other insects aren't quite ready, and they're still nesting and may not be ready to emerge yet. Like I talked about, leaving bare ground and soil. Like I said, most of our native bees are ground nesters, so they need that bare dirt so that they can nest in it, and also loose. You can find out lots of information on our website, doee.dc.gov/pollinator. We have a whole page dedicated to pollinators. We have plant lists, we have information on planting guides, and just a lot of great information. as well as if you are in the district. I don't know if you've heard about it, River Smart Homes. It's a program through DOEE, and they can help you get natives into your yard. It's kind of cool because you just kind of pay almost like a copay, so that you can get like some basecaping, or even you can get rain barrels and also rain gardens planted. So it's a really great program, but that's another way to get natives into your yard at a pretty reasonable price. Because as you know, native plants aren't always the cheapest. And also here, I'll just say this now, we have lots of seeds. So if you guys are interested in some pollinator seeds, feel free, I'll give you my contact information at the end, and I'd be more than happy to send you a packet or two of pollinator seeds where you can just kind of go at it and throw them in your yard. It's a good mix of forage as well as habitat for them. And also there's a lot of great resources out there like pollinator.org. They have guides where you can put in your zip code and it'll give you a plant list for that area of plants to plant. And also Xerces has a lot of great information if you're looking for learning more about native plants that'll support certain species. So I talked about this continuous pollinator garden, just making sure that you're having stuff planting throughout the year. So you know what, you want stuff to be able to bloom in the spring and in the summer and in the fall. So one of the first things, I have some wild geranium in my yard, and they are always the first things that bloom in there. So they don't last very long, but then after that, you want to make sure that you have stuff that'll come next and just throughout the season. Because like I said, I work with honeybees. This is kind of beginning of the dearth where there's not a lot of stuff out there for them. And you start to feel it because they get kind of grumpy and mean. So it's, so you know when it's time. So when you start seeing less and less blooms out there. So we can kind of help all the pollinators by making sure that we have stuff planted throughout the seasons. So, you know, we're talking about spring, we're having wild geraniums, but then towards later summer and the fall, New England asters are coming out. So if you can plan ahead to make sure that you're planting stuff throughout the seasons, that'll be a great help to pollinators. Like we talked about the garden cleanup, just waiting, because your garden, you know, if people are excited to work in it, it looks a little beat up from the year before, a lot of dead stems and stuff, but those are all really important to pollinators and other insects. So kind of a rule of thumb, you want to wait till the temperatures are continuous about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. There was a thing I was reading, I was talking about once you finish your taxes, you can think about cleaning up your yard. And you just want to kind of leave the mess there because of some of the native bees nest in stems, and also other insects nest in stems. And if you're cleaning it all up before they even have time to emerge, then that's the end of them. So we just want to be conscious of all of our species in the district. And then I found this cool thing on the Xerces website. It's called the Urban Habitat Assessment Tool. It's kind of like a little worksheet that you can check off in your yard and kind of see how you're at and providing space for pollinators, and kind of gives you a score and also tells you where you can improve. So if you want to check that out, you can go to xerces.org and just type in Urban Habitat Assessment Tool, and it's kind of cool. You can print out and go take a look and see how you're doing in your yard. So as far as like cleaning up, like I was talking about, there's also good guides on how to do this, to leave the dead flower stalks over winter, and then the spring to cut them back, to provide cavity nest for bees. These are like mason bees and stuff. And then the summer, you know, you think it might look ugly, but then the other ones will come out and the flowers will kind of cover it up. So it's not that bad of an eyesore. And then the process kind of starts over again. So there's lots of information. I got this off xerces.org about how you can clean up your yard throughout the year without really disturbing the nesters in there. So we did talk about pesticides. We get this a lot. So this is, we work, like I said, I work a lot with our pesticide division. So just be aware that if you need to apply pesticides, avoid putting applications where plants are blooming, because we don't want to you know, hurt our pollinator friends. Also, if you're going to apply anything like aerial spraying or anything like a, not aerial spraying, but, you know, just spraying anything, you want to make sure you're doing it in the right conditions. And all this is taught when the people take a pest, like in the district, if you want to apply pesticides, you need a license. So they all are taught this when they get their license. But it's something like if you see someone spraying something and it's a windy day and there's lots of drift, you can always call in to the number down below and just let the pesticide division know, and they can go investigate. That also goes as far as bee kills or any suspicious deaths. But we had a few years ago, people were worried about some bumblebees. So, you know, the pesticide division will go out there and inspect if you see something that just looks a bit off. So there are special labeling now on some pesticides for bees. Specifically, so the pesticide applicator should be reading that to understand when they can and cannot spray these pesticides. So if the number on the bottom, if you see pesticide misuse, you can call our pesticide division, or if you have any questions about pesticide, you could always email them, doee.pesticides.org. Because let's face it, sometimes when you are trying to kill some of these invasive plants, you may have to use some herbicide for assistance, but as long as you're using it appropriately and following the label, that's not a problem. But it's when you do things that you're not supposed to be doing that there is a problem. So let's talk about mosquitoes, everyone's favorite. They are eating me alive right now. There's our buddy, the old tiger, Asian tiger mosquito, the one that, you know, likes to chase you. So everyone says remove standing water. That's kind of a given. But these guys, they just need like hardly any water. So that's kind of the problem. For example, went to my neighbor's house to let their dog out when they were gone, and I was getting eaten alive. And then I noticed that they had on their back porch, they're recycling full of bottles and stuff, like just the little bit of water that accumulated like in bottle caps or just on the edge of the bottle. That was all the mosquitoes needed. And I seriously got bit like 20 times. So, you know, so it's unlike our native mosquitoes that need bigger bodies of water. They just need hardly any water. And these are the ones that are probably driving everyone crazy. And then they call the mosquito people. So good ways to get rid of them is try to kind of think outside of the box of just like standing water, like, I don't know, like a bucket of water, you know, think about just little bits of water. Like I said, the recycling bin could be trapping just enough water for these guys. Also English ivy, these guys like ground cover because it kind of keeps things moist, and you can actually keep water, you know, if it rains a lot, the water will accumulate in there and it will stay. So English ivy is notorious for harboring these mosquitoes. So like I said, we don't want the invasives. Invasive plants, invasive insects kind of go hand in hand. You can also put mosquito dunks and bits. That will, and some of the standing water. Also fans, you know, put fans outside because then they can't fly. And also passive traps. I've been kind of reading about these, and I kind of tried a version of this one from the Audubon was post on there. It was like having a bucket of basically yucky water to attract the mosquitoes, put a net on top, and then when they lay their larvae, they'll drop in the mosquito bits to get them before them, and then they can emerge. So there's ways to do it. It's just you kind of have to be smart about it. And unfortunately, we're kind of overrun by these guys right now. So then that's when people call the mosquito people. So as far as our natives, these are just some of the ones that we have around here. You know, we have some sweat bees. They're the ones that require the bare ground. They're really cute, and they're like metallic and green. Bumblebees, probably the most noticeable, probably the ones also I get a lot of calls about are carpenter bees, because people hear them in their fence. You know, they're not going to damage your fence that bad. You know, they kind of hollow out and to lay eggs in there, and they also hibernate in there. And also our common eastern bumblebees, they will reuse rodent dens. So I've got on my front walkway. I used to have chipmunks there. The chipmunks are gone, and now it's full of bumblebees, which is kind of cool. Because I don't know, I just go out there and watch them go underneath the walkway. It's kind of fun to watch. Honeybees, they get a lot of, they get a lot of attention because they're kind of like the charismatic one, and people like honeybees and all. They're European, they're not native. They're kind of like chickens, they're kind of an ag product, but people keep them. We have over 500 hives in the district. So that we do have lots of honeybees around as well. And then of course, butterflies. Everyone loves butterflies, and butterflies love large flat flowers. So those are the ones around here. So in the district, we do have a pollinator protection plan that was developed specifically for the district. Kind of talks about what you can do as.
We can't hear Natasha.
Oh, you can't hear me?
I can hear you fine, but I'm wondering why.
Yeah, I'm not muted, so I'm not sure. Is it just one person who can't hear me, or is it multiple?
Yeah, I think we can all hear you. That person.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay. So the district has a pollinator protection plan. It has information on there for pesticide applicators, residents, beekeepers, just anyone, things that everyone could do to protect pollinators in the district. And actually, if you're in Maryland or Virginia, both of those states also have pollinator protection plans. These were kind of came out of presidential memo from Obama a few years back. And so every state was to develop a pollinator protection plan. Most of them were managed pollinator protection plans, specifically for honeybees, but we don't have any commercial pollination services in the district. So we changed ours to a pollinator protection plan for all the pollinators in the district. So that is also on our website on DOEE.gov.dc.gov. And something that you may not know is that DC is also a bee city. We were the first bee city on the East Coast. So what that means is we're just doing things to encourage all bees, native and honeybees in the district. I am working on getting some more of these signs out so that I can get them out to people who have really awesome pollinator gardens or have done things like in their neighborhood. So if you're interested in getting one of these signs out on your, somewhere that your yard or a community center, somewhere you've planted a lot of pollinator stuff, just let me know and we'll work on it because I'm going to order some, and then I want to get more of them out into the community. It's also good because then people will see them and say, hey, what is that? And they'll look it up and learn more about it. So it's kind of it's kind of like Tree City, USA. See, it's set up as a bee city. We also have Georgetown University is also a bee campus. So we work a lot with Georgetown on pollinator outreach programs, especially during Pollinator Week. So if you guys have questions, specific questions or anything, or just want more information on some of the links, here is my contact info. And I think that's about it. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions and we can have a really good discussion. But that was kind of the basics about pollinators in the district and how you can kind of help them out.
Natasha, thank you so much. And I hope everyone can hear us after this. And let's go ahead and switch screens. And I'd like to put a question out to the participants. First, I'm assuming that you have been putting questions in the chat. If not, and you have some, please do that. I will also have a chance to talk, but Anna will be looking at those. My question to you is, have you noticed a decline in pollinators in your garden or your neighborhood in the last several years? And if so, what have you seen less of or more of? If any of you, actually, I'm putting this out for everyone in the who's on the Zoom with us. And if you put that in the chat, what pollinators are you seeing fewer of or more of? I'm very interested in what patterns we might have. For example, in my neighborhood, far fewer butterflies, but we have been seeing bees this year, which encouraged me. So I'll look forward to seeing that. So while folks are doing that, so Natasha, I want to get down to brass tacks with you. I get to ask you the first few questions as host. So let's say somebody's already put out the banquet table for the pollinators, right? You've put out the pollinator garden, you've put in the natives, and then July arrives. And suddenly there are mosquitoes. No matter what you did, there's still mosquitoes. So what are the first one or two things that you would advise that person to do first?
So personally, I have a war against mosquitoes. I've been trying everything. So just things that I've noticed that have helped a lot, like if I want to hang out in my backyard, fans. They can't fly with fans. And also just, I've been paying more attention after I noticed my neighbor's recycling bin, the mosquito breeding ground, just paying more attention to what's around you, and try to get rid of that. Honestly, I douse myself in DEET in the summer. I'm not gonna lie. That's the only thing that's gonna save me.
It's an ongoing low-level warfare in
Yes.
July and August.
Yeah. So, and people spray, and I understand why they spray, because they probably just get so fed up. But I think a lot of people don't understand when they do spray is that it kills everything, because they get told it's natural, it's just like some natural derivative, it's going to kill the mosquitoes, but they use it during the day, so that when they're fogging, they're killing mosquitoes, right, if they're out, but they're also killing like everything else. And so we do get calls, or even some beekeepers will say that their neighbor is going to spray. It's like, I think that's a kind of misconception that people have, that it's just killing mosquitoes. So I know personally, that's what I think about. I'm like, I don't want to kill everything, so I'm going to have to do what I can do to stop them. And a lot of times it is, when I do work in my own garden, I'm wearing long pants, long shirt, long socks, shoes, everything, just to try to minimize it, because there comes a certain point in the year where they're just relentless. But I'd rather try to protect myself than just kill everything in the yard.
We have a question in the chat. Can I go ahead and read one of the questions, Stella?
Can you hold off a second? Because
Sure.
I'm going to summarize a little bit. So Natasha, what I'm hearing, and I read this too in some of the articles that we provided, is with the fan. So the thing to do is to, if you're out with friends or family out on the patio, is to position the fan so that it blows outward, right? Sort of away. So not just around, but kind of in the outward direction of where you're sitting. Is that correct?
That's just kind of blow them out. That if you think about it, you ever go into like some of the grocery stores in the summer where it's just like a big fan hits you, because it's literally blowing out to get rid of all the insects from coming in. So it's that same idea. Because they're, if you see them fly, they're kind of flying like this, so they're not the sturdy, the best flyers. But they'll chase you. I literally, last night I was working on this presentation, and a mosquito the whole time was after me. So it was quite pity.
We don't want to hear that. We want to know all the ways that you've solved this problem.
I have not solved the problem. So if anyone has any better ideas, I did throw mosquito bits in a bucket in the yard to try to kill them. And then my dog immediately went and drank it. But I was like, okay, it's not going to blow up your stomach because you're a dog. But, just.
Yeah, I won't kill the dog. Yeah. The other thing I would say is that I've read in all the articles, and you mentioned it, is I would say the next thing is check for standing water. Is that correct? Yeah.
So standing water. And like I said, it's not just the obvious standing water. It could be just, like your kid left a toy in the backyard and now it's got some water in it, or you have your gardening shoes out there, they have a little bit of water in it, and there's mosquito breeding in there. So you kind of have to think, people think standing water like, oh, I don't have any, like, I empty my bird bath all the time just to make sure. So stuff like that, but just, kind of be vigilant. You won't ever get rid of all of them, but you could definitely make it a little more comfortable in your little space of your yard.
Great, thank you. I think I got those two important questions in. Do you want to grab something from the chat?
Sure. This question is from Cher. Confused about native versus non-natives. Most community gardens and urban farms grow non-native vegetables and fruits that require pollinators. Should these gardens or farms plant only native veggies and fruits to increase the native pollinator population?
So I'll just go, no, you can plant what you want to eat, but a lot of the things you do eat are native. You know, think of your tomatoes, your squashes, all those things need bumblebees that are native bees. So it's not just honeybees that are pollinating gardens. And gardens are different because they're contained, you're taking care of them. The things I'm talking about is like when people just have like an entire yard gone wild of like English ivy or other things that are just swallowing everything else whole. But you know, a garden is different because that's like a managed area.
Got it. Thank you. Kathy had a couple comments. When Stella asked if people are seeing less, she said, yes, far fewer butterflies and only 1 or 2 at a time. And then she also commented, I am aware that there are some plants that repel mosquitoes. So I think I read that too, right? If you plant certain species or no, that's a question for you, Natasha. Like, are there plants that repel them?
I have heard this. I have not been successful at this. I think I'm just a mosquito magnet, honestly. But yeah, I have heard this as well. And I think a lot of it, even if you're trying to not attract mosquitoes or if you're trying to attract pollinators, it's always about plant selection, right? You want to plant things for a purpose and know what they're doing them for, right? Whether it's planting vegetables to eat or whether it's planting stuff for pollinators to forage on or something to get rid of mosquitoes. So I think a lot of making conscious plant decisions in your yard is very useful.
So we do have, Kathy, you had I think written some answers in, and you know, we have those 3 fantastic articles that we shared as part of this. And so like some of you, I did my homework, and the plants that are mentioned are bee balm, marigolds, rosemary, lavender, garlic, citronella, basil, I don't know if I mentioned that already, and sage. So those are some of the plants that we're advised to plant around our vegetables, especially if we want to not get eaten alive while we're out there tending our gardens. And one of the tips was that don't just let the flowers just be there, but actually brush up against them. And that releases the oils and the fragrance into the air. So that'll help to act more of a guard against the mosquitoes while you're out there. So kind of go embrace your lavender and then enjoy some mosquito-free moments.
Just a couple more, just to if people aren't seeing the responses of things in their neighborhoods. Debbie says big drop in all kinds of pollinators this year versus past years. Also seems to be fewer birds, which might be related. Nora says less butterflies, more bees. Margaret Meyer says, I see many bees this year despite my neighbor spraying for mosquitoes. Deborah says, yes, Ward 3, fewer butterflies and less variety of bees, mostly carpenter bees and a few sweat bees. I am across the street from the DC maintained hive, so lots of honeybees. Joe said, we had little when we first bought our house in Maryland, but we added a pollinator garden and saw lots of bumblebees, butterflies, and monarch caterpillars. I've recently moved to DC and don't see many where I live, but I hope to plant some native and pollinator specific plants. Deborah also mentioned she stopped the association from using Mosquito Joe because it kills everything. Go, Deborah. Kathy asked the question, does DOEE have a campaign to stop the mosquito bombs to protect the pollinators?
No, this is something we have talked about, is about how can we change the way that a lot of the mosquito treatments are happening. So it's something that I have been talking about with the pesticides department. As of yet, you know, everything takes a long time, but it's something that is on our radar. Because even the pesticide department had talked about, you know, them fogging in the middle of the day when they should be out in the evening when all the other pollinators and stuff are already gone for the night. So it is something we have discussed. One thing interesting about DC is, unlike other jurisdictions, the district does not treat mosquitoes at all. And so any mosquito treatment is all from individuals. So that makes us a little different than anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have as much control of it because we don't do it.
Mhm.
Got it. Thank you. Another question we have from Debbie. Do mosquito dunks affect pollinators? I see wasps and other insects landing in my bird bath and don't want to harm them. Also, how often should you empty out and change water in bird baths?
Great questions.
So my understanding with the mosquito dunks is it hurts the larva. So like I said, my dog drank it, other insects might go drink it, but they should be fine. It's because it does something to the larva, something with their stomachs explode or something gruesome happens to them like that. I'm not exactly sure, but I know that it is safe for other creatures.
In fact, I wanted to talk about BTI. So again, those very helpful articles, they recommend that BTI, which is the bacterial treatment that's available, is very effective and it doesn't harm anything else. So it's not going to harm bees, it's not going to harm butterflies, it's not going to harm your dog, but it will kill the larva that consumes them apparently within minutes. Sounds horrific if you're a mosquito. It seems like a very safe treatment and you just need to change it out about once a month. That's the advice. So I'm curious, we have so many knowledgeable people here, especially the master naturalist from Arlington. Have you guys had good experience with the BTI, the bacterial treatment, and have you used it in particular ways? Feel free to just jump in and speak up, unmute and contribute. Has anybody used the BTI? Do you put it, apparently you have to change it out about once a month, but that it's very effective in standing water.
Yeah, I live in McLean Gardens and we have 23 acres and we use BTI everywhere that we can find water to put it in. And we use the dunks and we also use the bits, but we didn't know about the English ivy. So I think we're going to start pulling that. We've been keeping it off trees, but not pulling it out of the ground. So I think that needs to go.
Anybody else has used natural bacterial treatments? I know there are all kinds of, like there's the barrel recommendation where you put the wire mesh over it, but I've also read that raccoons love to play with those. So it sounds like just a simple addition of the tablets seems to do the trick, that you don't need any fancy contraptions. I'm curious if people, again, we're all learning from each other, so feel free to share your experience with any of those attempts. Anybody? Okay. Another technique that I read about is movement of water. So bubbles in the water or keeping water running. And I'm wondering if anybody is using that technique in their yards. So that's a good one to remember. Just keep the water moving. And if you have a fountain, to bubble up air. And that way the larva, actually the mosquitoes will not lay their eggs because they don't like that kind of a spot. And also if they happen to be there, they're not going to thrive in a moving environment. So that's another one. So far we've got the BTI. You know, as I researched this, I was kind of intrigued by all the non-lethal possibilities that are out there. And I think we just have to really start looking at them. You know, take a look at the water that's standing. If you have standing water that you really can't do much about, then get that BTI treatment and it seems to be very safe. And then keep the air moving, keep the water moving. Those are just some very simple ideas. And then the fragrant native plants. So I'm wondering if any of you have any more war stories or any other things you've exchanged. I know the Armin folks had a very lively listserv discussion. Or any of you here, please feel free to pipe up. Are people being shy?
I'll just share something. I went,
Yeah,
we
sure.
participated in the Shepherd Park garden tours in May, and they were telling me that as a neighborhood, they had bought a bunch of these things called biogents, kind of like mosquito traps, and they put them all over the neighborhood and they say that they work. So of course I went home and Googled it. But it's kind of the same thing where it lures them in to put the larva and then that's the end of them. So
Can you say the name of that again, Natasha? Maybe
yeah, it was it was Biogents. I could find the link and put it up on the thing. But
be
they
great.
were buying them in bulk from the company, and they were putting them all over the neighborhood.
And if you could add your info to the chat as well, Natasha, I think that would be great.
Yeah.
I went and grabbed and I'm sorry, they're long links. I don't know why they're so long like that. I went to the, basically, for those of you that were asking about the articles that Stella's referencing, those were in the original, like when you signed up for this workshop, like in our description, we had linked to these 3 articles that we're speaking about. And so if you go back to the Eventbrite, you'll see those there, but I went and tried to grab the links and they're quite long, but anyway, those were 3. One of them is it's not a digital link because the article was not is not available online. It's literally just a screenshot of the article from a local paper that our friend and master naturalist Susan wrote, which I thought was a great article. I personally didn't know that there was a different mosquito biting me during the day than what's biting me during the night. Like that one kind of blew my mind. I was like, what? 2 different ones. And then the other thing, that the other little fact that blew my mind was that a single little bottle cap from a bottle could support up to, I think it was 300 eggs or something, mosquito eggs, in just like one little bottle cap. So those articles are good reads. One of them has a quiz with some really interesting information about like just mind-blowing kind of stuff about mosquitoes that you might have never thought about.
And one of the unexpected tips in the Bay Journal article is what we eat can make us more or less attractive to mosquitoes. So if you eat all the good fermented stuff like cheeses, and beer is apparently especially attractive. So if you have a beer drinking buddy and you put them next to you, that's where all the mosquitoes are going to go. And what they recommend is apparently chocolate and mint. If we consume chocolate and mint, that'll make us a little bit less attractive for mosquitoes. So I thought that was a totally unexpected tip. But again, things we do for ourselves can make a difference. And I see Deborah Barber here. And Deborah, I don't know if you're multitasking and also doing work, but you're a gardener, you're a master gardener and a naturalist, and you've been dealing with this for a while. What's been your experience? How have you managed it?
So my biggest challenge in managing a community garden, not my own garden, a community garden that surrounds a community center and it has to be nice looking, is when I do the practices that Natasha recommended, taking a long time to deadhead, delaying cleanup. I get a lot of complaints from neighbors that it looks sloppy. I've never had any trouble with mosquitoes in that garden. I have a lot of pollinators, a lot of really good bugs, and I have been bitten by a mosquito maybe twice in the 4 years that I've been managing that garden, because there is no standing water, there is no English ivy. I'm definitely concerned that sometimes there may be some neighbors who use Mosquito Joe, and that's lessening the number of pollinators that I'm seeing. But I'm still seeing a lot of really good stuff. So I feel really lucky that I can go out there, bare arms, bare legs, and work, and the mosquitoes don't get me because the property is relatively dry, I guess.
Natasha, did you want to add anything to that? You look like you were nodding your head.
Oh, I was reading the chat. Sorry. Yeah, I think also just loving, like, if you think about English ivy, it's covering everything, it's keeping it moist, it's keeping water in. And if you have a garden that you're managing and actually actively taking care of, that's less likely to happen. So yeah.
Kathy brought it. Kathy Mary had an interesting question or comment. I'm curious as to why nature has given us mosquitoes. She watches that there's no standing water and thins out her bushes and trees, but she just puts on rosemary soap on exposed areas when she's in the garden, and then she use the lavender soap if she gets bit. That's her solution.
One of the recommendations in one of the scientific articles is to create habitat not only for other native plants, but for insects that eat mosquitoes. So think about the insects that kind of fill out the circle of life that enjoy mosquito protein. And then there are 2 kinds of birds that are recommended. So this really expands the conversation that a lot of us are having, is how can you think about ecosystems? You can't just think about mosquitoes. You have to think about plants and trees and birds. And apparently swallows and eastern bluebirds are very, very helpful. They love mosquitoes. And so if you create a habitat that is welcoming to swallows and to eastern bluebirds, they will also be natural control for those mosquitoes. And I thought that was like, I had never ever heard that advice. So that's very interesting to, again, think about the whole cycle of life.
I had
And
a
bats,
conversation with,
yeah.
I had a conversation with my supervisor today because they just bought a home recently and they have a really bad mosquito problem. So I was telling her some of the things that I've learned from the articles, including the fans. But I came across an article today about dragonflies and how they eat hundreds of mosquitoes. So if you put stuff in your yard that's going to attract the dragonflies, you know, like you said, Stella, then that could help you out. And so her response was that they're planning to install a bat box because they want to bring bats to help out with the mosquitoes. So I thought that was very cool.
Mhm. Anything else in the chat or any questions or lessons from your own experience? Deborah, that was really helpful, by the way. It was inspiring to hear that it works, you know, that taking that holistic approach works.
I will say that bats eat a ridiculous amount of insects in their weight every night. So, you know, bats are our friends. I did have a bat box at my previous house and it actually had bats in it. And I did notice a decline in mosquitoes. We do have people that call and complain about bats because they, you know, they do poop a lot, but the garden seems to like it. But yeah, so if you can attract bat boxes are always good. They're not always guaranteed to have bats. You just get lucky if the bats move in it too, but they also eat a lot of mosquitoes.
Cher had a comment, heard about someone using mosquitoes to pollinate veggies grown in their hydroponic greenhouse.
Cool. That makes sense, doesn't it? They are pollinators. That's the thing. Mosquitoes are pollinators. They're
Deborah
just so
mentioned that it's the male mosquitoes that are pollinators, Deborah says. So is that true that not females, but the males do the pollinating? Not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one. And I wonder if they're like some of our wasps and stuff where they're kind of like accidental pollinators. You know, they didn't mean to, but they kind of pollinated along the way when they're doing their other stuff. I welcome all the male mosquitoes. They could come hang out in my yard all they want if the ladies just stay.
I mean, it strikes me that they are really part of the ecosystem, aren't they? And that those of us that are either wildlife biologists like Natasha or environmental professional stewards like Deborah or master naturalists, such as many of us are here, that we're really being asked to take kind of a holistic ecological approach and to look at, well, mosquitoes are part of the ecosystem, but when our own habitats and our urban dwellings are so out of balance with the ecosystem, then we are kind of creating that imbalance. So as long as mosquitoes are kind of a balanced part of the ecosystem, it sounds like they don't need to be as much of a problem as they are generally in our neighborhoods. So one of my takeaways from this, from doing background for this conversation, from studying the articles, as Anna mentioned, from talking to people, is that we have like a dozen options to us in controlling and managing mosquitoes before we go to the zap box, before we go to the sprays. And it's like a really like a whole palette of opportunities, right? So just to go over them, remove standing water. And Noreen Hannigan, I don't know if you're here, Noreen, but Noreen has this great practice she mentioned in the listserv, make it Mosquito Monday. Every Monday, go and take a walk in your yard and look for standing water and get rid of it. So Mosquito Mondays, get rid of standing water. Move the water, move the air, create a habitat that is not welcoming, in particular to mosquitoes, get rid of that English ivy, and fill it with native plants. And then to eat a little dark chocolate and mint if you're going to go out in the yard, and use fans strategically. So those are just some of the options that are available to us, and there are more. So is there anything that I've missed or any additional solution? Oh, BTI. And of course, there's BTI, which is a fantastic tool. Doesn't harm anything but mosquito larvae. Just change it out once a month, and it's a great solution for still water in your yard and neighborhood.
Natasha,
did I miss anything? Yeah.
No, I think that was pretty comprehensive. Thank you, Stella. Thanks, Natasha, for answering a question about advocacy that came in. Debbie said, I've noticed more people in my neighborhood using Mosquito Joe this year. Any thoughts about how to start a conversation about the negative impacts on pollinators? Kathy adds, we need to educate the public too about the fact that West Nile not being a problem everywhere. And Natasha says, a lot of times people don't realize that they are spraying and killing everything. I would just explain to them that they are killing pollinators as well as mosquitoes. So, yeah.
Oh, I forgot to rant about zappers. Before we go, can we just, I had no idea that zappers were so bad. Can somebody who knows about it, Deborah, you have that expression on your face. You want to explain why zappers are horrible?
Yes, my husband, well-intentionedly, picked up a zapper from Costco. And I said, those things are horrible. We will use it for 2 nights, and then I will clean out the chamber and I will show you what we caught. And we caught all of these adorable little moths and other good things and very few mosquitoes. So the zapper problem is like the Mosquito Joe problem. They kill almost everything. It was heartbreaking. So he took it back.
So put the zapper away and take out the fan and aim it strategically, and you'll have better results. Yeah. Well, I found this very interesting and enlivening, and I think all of us have learned a new technique, a new approach that is holistic, and that can be helpful to the environment. Any other final thoughts, observations, successes? Master naturalists, feel free to speak up, especially if you have any ideas for master naturalist projects. That's really cool. We have about 5 minutes, and they're yours to use as you wish, or we can sign off. But I want to create space for everyone.
I wanted to plug a monthly program that we all do. So Stella and Deborah and I and Sarah and Ella from the Audubon Natural Society, you know, on the first Tuesdays of every month, we have these virtual iNaturalist Zoom parties where they're themed, and we get on for an hour and a half. And Deborah does this wonderful overview of how to make identifications using the app iNaturalist. And then we have a taxa specialist. So we had one, was it last night that we did it? No, it was 2 nights, or was it 2 nights ago? It was Tuesday night. We had fish. And it was awesome. Like, I didn't know anything about fish. And Trey Sherrard from Anacostia Riverkeeper gave us a thing about IDing fish. And then our next one, Sarah Nella, is a mycologist, and so she's doing fungi. So September 6th, the first Tuesday, and you can find out this, we'll have this on the Capital Nature calendar, and they'll go out and listservs for the master naturalists and such. But I just wanted to put that on your calendar. If that's something you want to do, if you want to learn how to brush up your observation, but mostly identification skills using iNat, then please join us for those.
And absolutely, if you are not using iNaturalist to help you identify your garden bugs, you are really missing out. I've learned so much about the things in my neighborhood, the bugs, the native plants, the non-native weeds from using iNaturalist. So I highly recommend it. It's a mother lode of information and connects you to a worldwide community of really cool nature nerds.
And it also helps us track the presence and the absence of pollinators. It was iNaturalist that kind of brought home to me the change in insect populations. So we're going to be helping scientists as well.
Debbie has a great question. I've never heard of master naturalists. Where can I find more info? Well, that's a great question. All the different states pretty much have master naturalist programs. Some more programs by county. For example, I'm Fairfax County in Virginia, but there's also Arlington County and such. If you just Google master naturalist and maybe wherever you're living, something will come up and you'll see different programs. Stella and I, we have both graduated from Virginia ones. However, we are working with the DC Master Naturalists on their programming right now. So wherever you are, Debbie, I think you're in DC. Yeah, definitely.
Silver Spring. Does Montgomery County have a program?
I would still, I mean, Maryland has some. Audubon Natural Society has a Master Naturalist program. I think University of Maryland perhaps has one. So if you just Google it, I'm sure different options will come up for you.
And if any of you have questions about master naturalists in your area, feel free to email me at stella@capitalnature.org. If you want some personal attention on the question, happy to answer your questions. Stella@capitalnature.org. Well, maybe unless there's anything else, I'm just going to thank everyone for joining us. You have a lot of power in your yard and in your neighborhood. If you have not so pesky conversations with your neighbors, have friendly conversations about alternatives they have and demonstrate them in your own garden, you can make a big difference. So we thank you for joining us and for doing your little part to protect pollinators in our gardens and neighborhoods. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Natasha. Thanks everyone for joining.
Natasha, thank you.